And welcome back to the fifth edition of Crunch Time. As usual, I'm Noah Elkin, here with.
Awesome, man. Per usual, we have a variety of topics from the sports world to talk about, so Noah hit me with it.
All right, Austin. Well, it's been exactly 102 years since the Boston Red Sox and the then Brooklyn Robins, now obviously the Los Angeles Dodgers, have met in the World Series. This looks to be like a very exciting series. Both teams are loaded with pitching. What can we expect, Austin?
I just think you're going to see games with a lot of offense and then games with really solid pitching. I'm really excited to see a Kershaw versus Chris Sale matchup. Those are like two of the best pitchers in the game. I think, in my opinion, top two pitchers in the game. And I'm really excited to see that matchup. But also, the Red Sox and Dodgers, they have some hitters. Like Mookie Betts, best player in baseball this season, most likely going to win MVP. JD Martinez, absolute slugger. Expect him to at least hit 2 home runs this series, so I'm calling that. On the Dodgers, they got Manny Machado, who is just obviously just a one-year rental, but he's going to come out and produce. Justin Turner, you have another slugger. And then you have the Dodgers outfield, who is solid. They have Kemp, Peterson, Puig, and I think Puig got snubbed for NLCS MVP. But you also have Bellinger, too, at first base. I don't know. There's just a lot to be excited about. I prefer the Dodgers just based on how much I've been naming players, and just because the Red Sox won a few years ago, and I'd like to see a new team win. So I'm rooting for you, Dodgers. What about you, Noah?
I don't know. I think I like the Red Sox in this matchup. They've been the best team in baseball all year, in my opinion. I don't think that's going to change. On the other hand, if you're a Dodgers fan, I mean, this is why you went out and you spent that money to get Manny Machado. You're right back here where you were last year. So that would be quite a story if the Dodgers were able to win it this time around. Personally, as a Giants fan, I'll be rooting for the Red Sox because I can't do my Giants like that. But regardless, it should shape up to be quite an exciting series.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it fold out.
All right, on to the NBA. We've talked a lot about Jimmy Butler on this podcast already. I just wanted to kind of close that little segment by saying, Austin, I think Tom Thibodeau won. I mean, when it comes down to it, Jimmy wanted to go. The Wolves owner wanted Jimmy gone. You know, I think they wanted picks or young talent. And Jimmy's still there, just like Tibbs wanted from the beginning.
Yeah, I think Jimmy Butler still wants out of Minnesota, but he's kind of accepted the fact that he's most likely will have to play out this season in Minnesota. I think maybe this is a sign that Thibodeau can like repair the relationship between Jimmy Butler and this Timberwolves organization. I think that's highly unlikely, but I don't know. I just think they mishandled this whole situation because, I mean, you traded a lot. You traded a lot of good like future players and a pick, and like Jimmy Butler's most likely gonna leave, and I think you should have just gotten some value from him because he's gonna most likely leave at the end of this year. But I do agree, Tibbs won. I don't necessarily agree with how he managed it, but we'll see how the season unfolds with Jimmy Butler and the Timberwolves.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's gonna play hard. I think he'll be good for the Timberwolves, but I just don't think that team chemistry that they've been looking for is there. I agree with you. I think he'll likely be gone by the end of this year. Um, I don't know. I think Tom Thibodeau just wanted Jimmy for one more year. I think he thinks they have a chance to win this year. Personally, it's starting to look less and less likely, especially considering how stacked the West is again. But yeah, I don't know. Congrats, Tibbs. You got what you want.
Well, if we're talking about the Timberwolves, I'd just like to go out and say that Derrick Rose is looking real nice. We're seeing like shades of like the former MVP self, so I think the Timberwolves should insert him in their starting lineup just because like I think the other day he dropped like close to 30 points and he put up some like he was looking real athletic. I think he's fully healed from that knee injury. I just think they should insert him in the lineup because he's a game changer and like think about it.
You really think he should start over Jeff Teague?
I think so.
That's bold.
I mean, obviously it's nice to have D-Rose off the bench, but I just think in the NBA where it's preaching put your 5 best players on the floor, I think D-Rose is one of the 5 best players on that team.
I mean, I guess you can make a case. Personally, I disagree. I think he works very well in his limited minutes role, coming off the bench to give that second unit an offensive spark. I think his defense is not there, and I'm not sure if he can manage to play 35 minutes a game. But maybe we'll see this season. More on the NBA. Austin, you and I were talking about some of the teams that really stood out over these first few days of the NBA season. We were talking about specifically the Pelicans, the Raptors, and the Nuggets. Um, the Raptors were able to topple the Celtics, who everyone thought was going to be the top team in the East this year, which they very well still could be, but it's looking like the East might be a little bit more competitive, at least at the top. As for the Nuggets, they are 2-0. They've beaten the Clippers, and more notably, they beat the Warriors in a close game in Denver. Pelicans, Anthony Davis is looking dominant as ever. He's got the big man support there now with Mirotic and Julius Randle.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. What do you think stands out about these three teams?
Okay, so with the Raptors, I think Kawhi's back. He's shown that he's still the two-way player he is. I think they've improved massively on defense with the Kawhi trade. So I've pretty much seen what I thought I would see from the Raptors, just good fundamental basketball from all five positions.
I think Lowry is looking real good too.
Lowry's I think the most underrated player in the NBA, just because he's what you want out of a point guard. I think he really works well with Kawhi Leonard, and he operates the pick and roll really well. With the Pelicans, I was hoping Anthony Davis would have a monster season, and he is having a monster season thus far. I mean, it's pretty early, but the fact that he has like two solid like front court players to go along with him, like if Mirotic sits out, you have Julius Randle to go along with them, and it's scary to think that like the Pelicans have three guys in their front court who can drop 30 easy on any given night, and like easily two of them can drop 30 any given night at the same time. With the Nuggets, I'm really surprised with how well their defense is looking. They're really aggressive. Because I watched the Warriors game last night, and I just noticed that they're picking a lot of pockets, making the Warriors make a lot of bad passes. Jokic is looking real good. I think he'll finish top 3 MVP. If you looked at the game against the Suns the night before, or on Saturday, he had a stat line that was incredible. He had 35 points, finished perfect from the field, made almost all the free throws. So I think Jokic is looking like a MVP contender this season. And I'm really excited to see how this NBA season unfolds, especially the West.
All right, well, speaking of exciting things in the NBA, we can't move on without first talking about that Lakers and Rockets brawl from the other night. Now that some time has passed, we can let you know that Brandon Ingram was suspended for 4 games, Rondo for 3, and Chris Paul for only 2 games. Do you think those punishments fit the crime?
Well, I definitely think Rajon Rondo should have gotten suspended maybe a few more games, just because he had really nothing to do with the whole situation. It was just Brandon Ingram mad that he got called for a foul, and I think it was just really uncalled for Brandon Ingram to just push James Harden just after he got called for a foul, because he was just going in the lane, taking contact, and got the and one. But I don't know, I just thought it was really disrespectful for Rondo to just spit in Chris Paul's face. And I mean, if someone spits in your face, who's not going to throw a punch after it? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. I felt that with Ingram. It was maybe there should have been a whistle, but regardless, that's not that's a stupid mistake. I think this will be a learning experience for Ingram. As for Rondo, I was a lot more surprised about Rondo's reaction. I know he's always been kind of a gritty player, but he's a veteran, and he has to know that you can't spit in someone else's face and get away with it in the NBA. I mean, how many cameras do they have pointing at the court at all times,
At least 20.
Yeah, and with Paul, I think he was well within his rights to retaliate. I mean, I wouldn't enjoy being spit on by Rajon Rondo either.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I felt that Brandon Ingram and Rondo, the suspensions could have been slightly higher. But I get that I think the Commissioner Silver is not trying to suspend a lot of big name players early in the season.
Yeah, I think I'm just respect LeBron James more, just how poised he looked during that whole scuffle. he was not taking any side because he knew both sides were equally as at fault in that time. But I just saw like the video again, and I just saw like LeBron James just step in to be like, guys, let's just play the game, and just calmed Chris Paul down. So I respect LeBron James for just keeping his composure during that very, very tense time. So LeBron, you're great.
Yeah, well, and you know that Chris Paul and LeBron James are really good friends outside of basketball. So
Look at the banana boat photo
exactly,
if you haven't.
exactly. So who else would be better to come and separate Chris Paul from that scuffle? In the NFL this week, back on Thursday, the Denver defense put on a show against the Cardinals. Get this, the Denver defense alone outscored the Cardinals defense, offense, special teams, the whole team. The Denver D put up over 100 yards, 2 TDs, and a whopping 5 turnovers.
Wow.
All of this is likely the tipping point for Cardinals' former offensive coordinator Mike McCoy, who's recently fired right after that game. And I can't say we didn't see this coming. Josh Rosen had posted the lowest QBR of any quarterback this season, aside from Nathan Peterman. And heading into that Week 7 contest, the Cards have been dead last in yards per game, first downs per game, third down conversions, and they were second to last in points. What do you think of all this?
Well, just watching Josh Rosen play over the past couple of weeks, he just looks really confused out there. And so I think it was more so just like he had trouble reading the defense, and I don't know, the play calling just seemed very off. So I think it was a necessary move. If I was a Cardinal fan, I wouldn't like give up hope on Josh Rosen, just because it's like with every rookie quarterback you have growing pains, but the change was necessary because the offense as a whole just looked confused and lost over these past few weeks outside of Larry Fitzgerald. And it's just sad that this is Larry Fitzgerald's last season most likely. So I don't know. I hope this change leads to a season turnaround, just because I want Larry Fitzgerald to like have a decent season with his team. But it's NFL. There's the bottom sellers. So right now, Cardinals, you're looking at a full rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, I also would say don't give up on Josh Rosen. He's only played a few weeks. The offense in general has not looked good. It wasn't, it's not just Rosen underperforming. The running game has practically been non-existent, which I think a lot of that you can chalk up to McCoy's lack of creative play calling. Everything with him seems to just be a straight rush up the gut, which is extremely predictable and easy to defend if you're the Broncos defense.
Also, I just think the Cardinals need to, if they're looking for a rebuild, start with that offensive line. The offensive line's just putting too much pressure on Rosen. He has to make quick decisions, and as a rookie quarterback, it's hard to always just feel like you're going to get sacked, so you're just trying to get rid of the ball. And so that's where I think the bad decisions are coming from. But yeah, I mean, the Cardinals, from like compared to 2 seasons ago, I did not expect them to just fall this low. And I'm just really disappointed in David Johnson's season, just because he's also on my fantasy team. But I don't know. I just think the Cardinals offense just needs a surge of energy. And I'm hoping Byron Leftwich comes in and does that, because he's a former NFL quarterback, so I think he can relate to Josh Rosen on the growing pains of being a quarterback, a young quarterback trying to like lead a franchise, expect to be the face of the franchise. So I think it's a good change, and we'll see what happens the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think it's a fitting change considering that Byron Leftwich, as he's being promoted to offensive coordinator, he's leaving his previous QB coach spot. So he's already worked with Rosen a little bit, and I think that bond will help the Cardinals, if not this year, next year, and into the future. Also coming out of that Cardinals Broncos game, Patrick Peterson, the Cardinals star cornerback, has actually asked for a trade. He wants to be gone by the trade deadline. And Austin, you and I were kind of talking about where would be the best place for him to land, and we both kind of agreed that the Chiefs make a lot of sense. I mean, the Chiefs are 5-1 now. They're playing. Their offense is incredible. Nobody can seem to stop them. Their one defense, or their one setback or whatever might be in their secondary with Eric Berry out, and probably not going to be returning for at least a few more weeks, if not longer. So Yeah, I think Patrick Peterson would make a lot of sense in the Chiefs system.
I agree. The one thing I just don't understand is why the Chiefs traded Marcus Peters, so someone that might play in the Super Bowl. Just throwing it out there. And if they kept Marcus Peters and traded for Patrick Patterson, like imagine how legendary that secondary would be. You have like I think two Hall of Famers on the corner, and then you have another Hall of Famer at the top playing center field for you guys. So I just don't understand that Marcus Peters trade, but hey, if they can get Patrick Patterson, I mean that's a good trade off.
Yeah, I will say the the Chiefs defense was actually looking better this week against Cincinnati, which is actually a pretty good team this year, Cincinnati Bengals. So I don't know. I think the Chiefs definitely could use some secondary support, but their front seven looks more than capable. I mean, D Ford was getting to the quarterback on what felt like almost every other play.
Yeah, and like the one thing I've noticed with the Chiefs is they're not afraid to go to an offensive shootout, and they're confident they'll win. Because like if you look at Pat Mahomes like in college, literally every game he played was just okay. I literally have to throw out for at least 700 yards a game just to help my team win. So I think if it comes to an offensive battle, the Chiefs are confident they're going to come out on top. But like you don't want it to just come to a shootout and come to the last possession. If you can have the game like locked down pretty early on, I think that's best. And I think the Chiefs definitely are missing that piece in the secondary, but their front seven's looking real good. So I'm excited to see how the rest of the Chiefs season unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think it's going to end in the Super Bowl against the Rams, but
Yeah.
it's early, and we'll see.
Hey, and if Marcus Peters gets a pick six, I'm just saying, Chiefs, you boofed it.
All right. Well, Austin, one of your favorite players from the Raiders, Amari Cooper, was just dealt to Dallas for a first-round pick. The Raiders are kind of underachieving this year, and with this move, it looks like they're headed for a rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad just because, it's the last few seasons in Oakland. This was probably Marshawn Lynch's last season playing football ever. And, I had a lot of high hopes just because, new change. I thought Gruden would take hold of the offense, really lead this whole innovative charge. But the defense, as I expected, was slacking, and that's really been what's holding us back, I think, just because Khalil Mack was our only weapon on defense. And now that we don't have that consistent pass rush, we're just getting wrecked through the air because we don't have good corners or anything. Uh, Offensively, it hurts just because like you lose your number one receiver. I mean, Jordy Nelson's a good one, but I don't know. I'm kind of just a little bummed because I really liked Amari Cooper and I thought he had the potential to become a franchise icon. But I understand from like a football standpoint that you don't see the team going anywhere these next couple of years, and Amari Cooper is a player that has pretty good value, and I'm glad they got a first round pick for the Cowboys. I think they see themselves still as a contender, even though they're like 3-4 right now. Uh, I think they knew that they needed to make a trade for a number one receiver just because their pass game has been struggling a lot. Like Cole Beasley is their number one receiver, and like who wants Cole Beasley as their number one receiver?
Solid number two.
Solid number two.
Can't be your number one.
Can't be your number one. And I think Amari Cooper will fit nicely with Dak Prescott. Just a little bummed as a Raiders fan that we kind of just let him go that way. But, I hope in 3 or 4 years from now when they're in Las Vegas, they're a good team. So we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. I think John Gruden kind of knew that there would be an eventual rebuild from the moment he dealt Khalil Mack. But I think that's okay. He got 2 first rounders for Khalil, and then another one here for Amari Cooper. So they're gonna have a very exciting draft coming up this year. And as for the Cowboys, yeah, great. You got your number one receiver. I think that puts you right back in contention for the for that division. The Giants, the Redskins, the Cowboys, and the Eagles. Really, nobody. I mean, I said this a couple weeks ago. Nobody really seems to be standing out. I think, especially now that the Cowboys were able to pick up Amari Cooper, this is anyone's division title.
Yeah, I definitely think Amari Cooper's a game changer just because it's like, even though he doesn't look like the same receiver as when he had 2 1,000-yard seasons to open his career, I still think he's a game changer. I think he'll adapt nicely with Dak Prescott. And I think this is the first time in a while that I think the Cowboys have like a true deep threat. Because even then, like when they still had Dez Bryant was at like the tail end of his prime. So I think Amari Cooper still hasn't reached that prime, and so I'm excited to see him and Dak Prescott connect on a lot of touchdowns.
All right. Well, speaking of a lot of touchdowns, Drew Brees back in the news. He passed for his 500th overall touchdown this season, and in the same game, he beat the Ravens, which puts him in pretty elite company with Peyton Manning and Brett Favre as the only quarterbacks ever to beat every single team in the NFL.
Drew Brees, you just make me want to clap my hands every week just because I respect you just for your consistency and your accuracy, and you can just throw a beautiful football. Good for you, man. I don't know. I think the Saints are looking real good this year. I hope they make it to the Super Bowl just because Drew Brees is like my favorite quarterback in the NFL, so like I cannot help but fangirl over this.
Dude, I'm right there with you.
It's just like, Drew Brees has just always been consistently good quarterback. I just felt like he's always been held back, and I'm hoping this is the season he does it. And he's looking real good. For like 40 years old, like I don't think anyone in the NFL can still throw a better football than him.
Yeah, I think the running back duo being back together, Kamara and Mark Ingram, is a force in the backfield, which will, I think, relieve pressure from Breeze in the passing offense. I think they can be a running football team if they want, and then when they do throw it, you got one of the best quarterbacks ever to play the game. Not to mention Michael Thomas running downfield.
It's scary to think that like they could easily be a running team, but then they also have this deadly pass game. So the Saints are looking real nice, and I think Marshawn Lattimore is getting back down to earth. Like he had a little off first few games, getting burned, but I think he's made the necessary adjustments, and I think the Saints defense is going to be more consistent for the rest of the season. But if there's one thing consistent about the offense is they're going to put up at least 20 points a game.
Oh, easily, no question. Yeah. In other news, the CU Buffs lose this week to Washington after a lackluster second half. They were only down 13-14 at halftime, but just couldn't really get any points on the board in the second half. It should be noted that our MVP, Laviska Shenault Jr., was out, as well as Jay McIntyre. So two of our top three receivers were gone. And our running back, McMillan, he played, and he actually had a pretty good game, but even he is coming back from injury and likely wasn't 100%. I'm not sure we had a real good chance to beat Washington even at full health, but I think being able to play with them for at least one half without some of our best players on the field paints a positive picture moving forward.
Yeah, I definitely think if they had Laviska and McIntyre, I think it would have came down to the wire just because the defense looked really good, but they just got tired at the end because the offense had trouble producing in the second half. But, once they get back, I think the offensive play calling is going to be better just because it's like a lot of the offense ran through Laviska, let's be real. And so it had to kind of just shift in the game plan. It's like, well, where do we find our offense? And I think it showed that we struggled to find like that consistent source outside of Laviska. So I'm hoping that the coaching staff takes this as like a learning lesson and realize they need to, change up their game plan a little. I think they need to find like a good balance between the run and the pass game. I think they should definitely run more just because it's like, it's getting kind of obvious that they're going to pass to Laviska. And so I'm hoping he comes back next week because the toe injury is a little stubborn and, we need you.
All right. Other news in college football, arguably the biggest upset of the week, Ohio State falls to Purdue by a margin of 29 points, I believe. 49-20, I think was the final score there. I certainly didn't see that coming. I thought Ohio State was on its way to probably a top 4 finish until now.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely surprised by this. Like, any team can fall, but as the number 2 team in the nation at the time, losing to an unranked team by almost 30 points, there's something to be concerned about if I was an Ohio State fan. I think Purdue just absolutely dominated their defense, and I think that there brings up a lot of questions about their defense. Their secondary was just picked apart, so maybe Ohio State's not as a strong team as we once thought they were. I mean, that Penn State win earlier in the season meant a lot, but Penn State's not looking as good as we thought. So I don't know. This season's full of a lot of surprises, so I'm really excited to see how this goes from here on out. But
Yeah, and still a long way to go. I think Ohio State could easily get back in the conversation as one of the better teams in college football, but they're going to have to prove it first.
yeah, Noah, let me ask you this though: who would you say by season's end is the top 4 teams in the college football playoff?
Well, I think you got to put Alabama up there.
Yeah, I don't see a scenario where Alabama's losing this season.
I think someone from the Pac-12 has a chance. I don't know if it's likely. It could be Oregon, could be Washington, could
Well,
be
I
Stanford.
don't think outside of Oregon, there's no chance another team makes it just because Washington has 2 losses, Stanford has 2 losses, the Buffs have 2 losses. So Oregon's really the only hope in Pac-12. So I don't see any scenario where the Pac-12 makes it to the playoffs this year.
I think Oregon has a chance, but they'll have to probably win out. Granted, have already played probably their 2 toughest games of the season against Washington and Stanford, one of which they were able to win, and the other they lost right at the end. So I don't know. I think they're a good team, but otherwise, I think Michigan has a really good chance to make it, and probably Clemson, as always, is right up there as well.
I would say for me, it's Alabama, Clemson, because they're looking solid. Let me think. Michigan, and I think Notre Dame. Those are my 4 teams.
Notre Dame has been looking real good.
Yeah, I think ever since they made that quarterback change, their offense has been looking real good. And, their defense has always been good for the past few seasons, but it's always been their offense holding them back. So, yeah, I think those are the top 4 teams in the playoffs next season, or this season.
Yeah, all right. Well, one last college football story. We were speaking of Michigan just a minute ago. Michigan actually beat Michigan State in their rivalry this weekend, which I don't know if that was a surprise necessarily, but it should be noted that Michigan State had won 8 out of the last 10 games of that matchup, and additionally, Michigan had previously lost 17 straight while playing ranked opponents on the road.
Yeah, I think this game showed that Michigan is a force to be reckoned with this season. I think they've been overrated these past few seasons, but I think it's also just because they haven't had a solid quarterback leading their offense. I mean, nothing against Wilton Spate, but he was just a very, very below average quarterback. Now that they have Shea Patterson, their passing game is looking great. Their running game is looking great. I think they have that balanced attack that Jim Harbaugh has been trying to establish, but now that he has the quarterback to do so, I'm excited to see where Michigan goes. I think their front seven's really looking real good. I think their secondary is looking a little weak this year, but I think Michigan is definitely playing themselves into the national title conversation.
Yeah, that was essentially my train of thought. Is Michigan's been a dominant team for the past couple of years without a top tier quarterback. Jim Harbaugh has been awesome for them, and I just think that he's going to have a field day or a field season, if you will, now with a top tier quarterback.
Yeah, I think the fact that they have Shea Patterson for next year too. I don't think there's within the next 2 seasons you're gonna see Michigan in the college football playoff, and I think just Jim Harbaugh was so good for Michigan football when he came in. He really reinvigorated the whole culture around it because I think for the past few years Michigan was a basketball school just because they've had more success, but I think now that their football program's back, if I was a Michigan fan, I'm excited. Just because it's just we finally have football back.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to leave it right there. I wanted to thank you for tuning into Crunch Time. Be sure to catch us next week. For Awesome Man, I'm Noah Elton.
See you guys next time. Have a good one.